Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for joining our Pride Month conversation today, featuring Montgomery County Common Pleas Court Judge Mary Wiseman and Thomas Yaegers, Tom, Vice President and Senior Counsel at Marriott Vacations Worldwide Corporation. I'm really excited to be with Judge Wiseman and Tom today, and I know that you are all as well. Today's presentation is the fourth in our 2023 Diversity Speaker Series, celebrating and honoring the accomplishments of diverse leaders in the field of law. The speaker series was the brainchild of BMD's Empowerment and Opportunity Committee, which is our initiative focused on promoting the unique and entrepreneurial spirit of our team with a common goal of driving equitable opportunity for clients, business partners, and the community. BMD strives to be inclusive and to embrace the diversity and distinctiveness of our team members and our clients, and we aim to foster a sense of belonging and respect so that each person is empowered to work, act, and be their authentic self. I'm going to make a plug for our September speaker. Please plan to join us in September when we honor Hispanic Heritage Month, and details will be forthcoming. But this month, we recognize the history, legacy, and accomplishments of the LGBTQ plus community. Pride Month is celebrated in June to honor the 1969 Stonewall Uprising in Manhattan, which was a turning point for the gay liberation movement in the United States and for the fight for LGBTQ plus rights. Today's panelists are distinguished lawyers whose pathways to success were cleared in part as a result of the activism embodied in the Stonewall Uprising. Judge Mary Wiseman was appointed to the Montgomery County Common Pleas Court General Division Bench in 2007 and was recently elected to a new 6-year term last November. So congratulations, Judge Wiseman. Prior to her judicial service, Judge Wiseman practiced complex civil litigation in state and federal courts across the country. During her practice, she aspired to become a judge, and she achieved her goal in a big way by becoming the first openly LGBTQ plus judge in Ohio when she was appointed by former Governor Ted Strickland just 16 years ago. We're also joined by Tom Yaegers, Vice President and Senior Counsel at Marriott Vacations Worldwide Corporation. For more than 17 years, Tom has practiced complex commercial litigation, and the last 5 with Marriott Vacations Worldwide. At his previous firm, Tom co-chaired the LGBTQ plus affinity group and served on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee to the Board of Directors. And in his current role, he continues to champion inclusion and diversity efforts within the company. Both Judge Wiseman and Tom are fierce advocates and champions of LGBTQ plus rights in their respective communities, and I'm hopeful they'll tell us a little bit about their advocacy efforts. I'm personally humbled to be in the presence of LGBTQ plus pioneers in the field of law, and I look forward to hearing about their experiences breaking barriers. You certainly can feel free to put questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. The chat function is disabled among the participants for the presentation, so if you have questions or comments, please put them in the Q&A, and I will be monitoring it, and so will Sarah from our team. A reminder, I should have said this at the beginning, but the conversation is being recorded, and we do make these available on our website. So after today, if you want to listen to it again, please do and share it with other folks. You may do that as well. I'm going to start off by asking a question or two, but please, again, feel free to put questions in the chat. We want this to be an informative, sort of casual dialogue between our two panelists. Judge Wiseman and Tom, certainly feel free to go anywhere that your thoughts take you and sort of, play off each other's comments that I think will make a really great conversation today. So first, as a young lawyer, did you believe that being a member of the LGBTQ plus community presented barriers to your career ambitions? Love to hear from both of you on that. So either one of you can sort of begin. Judge Wiseman, why don't we begin with you?
Sure. So my answer to that has to be put in context. And I'm fascinated to learn what Tom's answer is going to be to that, because we are from different generations. I am extremely confident that Tom is much younger than I am. So I graduated from law school in 1988. So you need to put what I'm getting ready to say in that context of the practice of law. We still relied on telephone books, yellow pages, and IBM Selectric typewriters. It was a different age and a different culture. And so when I became a lawyer, there certainly were perceived blockades or roadblocks to potential advancement. There's just no doubt about that. I, by sheer fate and accident, actually went to law school in Arkansas. So as a and practiced law for a bit in Arkansas. So probably in retrospect, being an openly gay woman going to the Mid-South and deciding to begin my legal career in the Mid-South in the late 1980s was not conducive to being embraced for being openly LGBTQ plus. And you certainly saw those barriers. Now, as time has moved on and society has the moral arc of the universe has bent towards justice, those barriers have dissipated to a large extent. And then I think it's important to note that there's a personal part in that as well, which is that in 1988, I was young and dumb and didn't really know how to address a lot of the complex issues that I was going to encounter as a gay lawyer. So it's not just that society has changed, it's that I've changed. I've gotten more confident in myself, and where perhaps a younger person might see a barrier, I no longer see a barrier. So I think there's been that flex in how things have progressed. So in the early days, yeah, it was going to be an issue. It was an issue to some degree. And then, time has gone by, and fortunately, society's gotten better, and I got wiser and smarter and tougher and more confident in my own skin. And that self-confidence has helped eliminate some of the burrs in the practice of law as well.
My experience, Judge, actually isn't far too off from yours. I grew up, and to give that background too, I grew up in a pretty conservative household. I went to Catholic school most of my life, and I, came of age in the age of like Matthew Shepard and incidents of those. So I came up viewing that, my sexual orientation would be a barrier to whatever career I chose. And certainly as a young lawyer, going to law school in Florida and going to work in a relatively, large law firm, but at the time, my office specifically tended to be a little more conservative, and I'm not talking politically, I'm talking, culturally and socially, a conservative environment. So I did not come out until I was 29. And I came out as a very young lawyer, 3 years out of law school. And that decision was, made in many parts. One, that I was not satisfied or happy being in the closet anymore. And I made the decision, even though I have to say I viewed it as a potential barrier, but at that point in time, I didn't care anymore. And at that point, going off what Judge Wiseman said, I kind of found my power and my confidence. And I came out of the closet, and people who had worked with me already for 3 years and knew my work ethic, knew what I was capable of, knew who I was as a person, generally friendly, likable. None of that changed. And I think just knowing me as a person and getting used to me without labels per se, I think it helped change hearts and minds in my office. And I was able to use that throughout my firm. And I started getting involved in the community, advocating for LGBTQ rights, and really any barrier, and whether that barrier existed or not, it was one that I definitely constructed. But I think partly it was there, but whatever barrier was there, I dumped that into advocacy and used it to break down those barriers. I advocated for my firm to get heavily involved in inclusion and diversity efforts. I helped found the ERGs at the firm. I got us involved in everything I could, firm sponsorship wise in the community. Pride, the LGBT Chamber of Commerce, Equality Florida, HRC, all of those things, and I champion supplier diversity and all of those issues within the firm. So when I initially, yes, I saw it as a barrier, growing up the way I did and having the perspectives that I did, but I definitely utilize that entire experience in my coming out to shift into embracing my authenticity and my authentic self and the things that I actually did value, and using that to change hearts and minds within my law firm practice and the community as a whole. So I definitely, I won't say I regret coming out late. I don't, like to generally frame things in that way. I certainly, would have liked to come out sooner, but I think everything happens for a reason. And I definitely think my experience definitely shaped my confidence, my ability to advocate, my desire to be passionate about these issues, not just for the LGBT community, but all disadvantaged and minority groups.
I certainly, sense a common theme in your comments, and I think if I can paraphrase, sort of, you've certainly used your experiences to become advocates in your various communities. You've grown more confident, you've grown wiser, certainly, and that seems to sort of give you a bit of a platform, from which you can continue to advocate for ongoing social justice efforts. If I could ask, and Judge Wiseman, you talked a little bit about changing, right? You said you've changed, society has changed, and I think now there is sometimes a feeling that the pendulum perhaps is swinging the other way, and so, what would you say about, now that you're older and wiser and have a platform, how do you use that platform to continue to further social justice, particularly when sometimes it feels heavy and it feels like, the pendulum might be swinging back a bit the other way, and particularly with efforts to impact the rights of LGBTQ plus people, in some instances youth. How do you continue to do that going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So thank you for that. And I think, there's multiple prongs to that. One is that representation matters. The fact that I show up at a meeting and changes the conversation in the room, it changes the tone of the room. So I've lived my private eye in the public arena for many years. And one of the things is that there may be people in the community that say, well, I don't actually know somebody who's LGBTQ plus. Now, whether that's true or not, because they probably do, but I want them to look at me. So I do feel a sense of responsibility to say, hey, no, I'm that, and look at me. I'm friendly and I have my act together, and we can solve this problem together. We can dialogue about an issue together. And I can't emphasize enough, I think representation matters. It matters to have openly gay people throughout the strata of society, and to be in the room, because it does change the conversation. And, and sometimes when those like little course corrections are needed, we're there to catch the ball and to make sure that things stay on track. So there's that. And as the pendulum does swing, and the fight for justice, you just have to be unrelenting. You must persevere. And, in my view, as like with Tom, I've seen the pendulum swing in a variety of different ways. And you just have to, I think, always recognize the battle is never won. Bigotry and discrimination never gets eliminated. And so certainly there's an effort to just understand that and understand that it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. To arm younger generations with lessons learned and encourage them to pick up the mantle or carry batons that were started very long ago. And then, as a judge, I'm limited as to things that I can say or do or advocate for, but I do have opportunities to from time to time express it to state legislators or express it to others. This is a bad law. It has bad consequences. This is going to be a nightmare to enforce. This is a waste of money because of the amount of litigation that's going to go into this. So there are those opportunities to advocate, even in the limited judicial role that I have. And the beauty, I think, of the LGBTQ plus community is its resilience. And the fact that we have learned time and time again that we can take a punch and get back up. And we're just relentless in the effort to find equality. And it's a big tent that includes a lot of different groups and seeking those allyships. And I just want to throw out kudos to your firm for doing this. I mean, how great is it that you're working towards this effort for diversity and inclusion and equity and embracing people for who they are and where they are. It is a distinction that you should be incredibly proud of, and which leads me to my final point on this. It's all about allyship. The LGBTQ plus community cannot do it on its own. We need allies, and that and this is a great example of that allyship. We need active allies, and it is that allyship, the forming of a broader coalition to move the needle more towards justice and fairness that I think is absolutely key. And it provides that respite. Running a marathon is hard. You hit mile 18 and it's not fun anymore. But that ability to look out and see that there are allies, I think it can be just incredibly important. So, Tom, what do you think?
I agree with everything that you just said, Judge. I think all of that is important. I think, Harvey Milk, in his own way, had it right when he said, come out wherever you are, because representation does matter. And the more people realize that they do, in fact, know members of the LGBT community, even if not directly, indirectly, that they're around, they're part of their daily lives, they're people that they know, they're people that they love, it matters. That's how, and I honestly think that's a large part of what changed the public's perception over the decades from, generally being against, more so than not, the LGBTQ community, to now you have a majority of Americans, and I would go as far to say most of at least the Western worldwide, having a favorable view, regardless of politics. I think you have people on both sides of the aisle in the V that have favorable views towards the LGBT community, want them to have rights, want them to have accomplishments. I think what we're seeing is that pendulum, that backlash by certain members of certain communities that do hold, these, for lack of a better word, bigoted beliefs against different marginalized groups, including our own. And I think you're seeing, a desire to backlash against it. But we are a resilient community, as Judge Wiseman said. We do persevere, and I think having that representation, and I'm not even just talking politically, which is very important to have advocates on the political stage for our rights and rights of other marginalized communities, but I think representation in day-to-day life, being a good citizen, realizing that, being friends and family to those around you, to those allies, that we need to advocate for ourselves. That everyday representation, that everyday being your authentic self is extremely important, and just as important as, the political activism and things that is also needed. But that everyday representation, that everyday embracing your authenticity, bringing your authentic self to whatever social situation you may be a part of, I think is equally as important. And that's how you open and change hearts and minds, is my opinion.
That's great. And while you were talking, a question did roll in, and I don't think you both have completely answered it. So I will ask. It's a question from David Scott, who's the managing partner of our Columbus office. He said, thanks again to both of our honored guests for participating. I'm curious to know what suggestions you might have for those who want to be allies. So, maybe sort of said differently, what does allyship look like in the workplace, and outside of the workplace, and sort of what are your thoughts in that space? You addressed it generally, but I don't think you answered that question specifically. So I'm interested to hear.
Yeah, so and that's a great question, and it covers a spectrum, like many of the topics we're addressing. In my work, I deal with an incredibly diverse workforce and an incredibly diverse stakeholder group. And so it goes from the personal to perhaps something that's less personal. So I certainly encourage, for example, our probation officers, if they're comfortable doing it, to have something that has a gay flag on it displayed in their office. Because the moment a gay person sees that gay flag, there is a sigh of relief to know that that is a safe space, or any other sort of signaling that can occur, whether it's an HRC bumper sticker on a car, a gay flag sticker somewhere in an office. That lets us know that, hey, I'm cool with this. So that sort of thing. And then, also just being, having great conversations with your LGBTQ friends about what's going on in their life. How do they feel about the legislation that's being passed across the country? Having open and authentic conversations and joining, inviting people to join in those conversations. So I don't think, allyship is anything that there can be a training plan for. It's really just saying, hey, you have a good heart, and you don't think that people should be excluded or made less than in life because of whom they love. And so you be authentic about that, and we'll be authentic about that, and we'll connect up. And of course, there are more structured groups. Nobody can see a parade that has a P flag, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays contingent, and not break out in tears. To see grandmas and grandpas who are just rocking it at the age of 80, out in the hot sun, standing up for their sons and their daughters and their grandchildren for LGBTQ plus rights. So it can be from structured affinity groups, whether it's P-Flag or other groups. But I really just think it's, making a statement, including distinctly sexual orientation and non-discrimination policies. There are still policies where they mention other protected classes, but they don't specifically call out sexual orientation or gender identification or trans rights in those policies. Making that express and explicit, because maybe other employees don't scrutinize those employee handbooks and employment manuals. I know as a gay person, I did and I do. Because again, I'm looking for, is this a group that's even put us on the radar? Or is this a group that hasn't really given a thought to the unique issues of my community? And so I think that, can be just a holistic, but ultimately I would say you have to be you, be authentic, be open, and learn what people are about and what their concerns are. Because allyship in Dayton, Ohio might look different than allyship in New York City and Manhattan. So it's kind of, where you are in your community. And, I say if you want to see change, find the helpers. So find the helpers and, support through time and talent and treasure the groups that are supporting the LGBTQ plus community. Tom, what are your thoughts about that?
Again, I agree with what you said, and just to echo that and put a finer point on it, I think allyship can be something as small as in individual conversations or in social settings. Not presuming that somebody you're talking to is heterosexual, right? So asking a man, how's your girlfriend, or do you have a girlfriend, as opposed to do you have a significant other? Do you have a partner? It's those small things that can have a big impact on the person you're talking to, especially if they're a member of the LGBT community. I mean, those of us who are more seasoned, I don't think have problems fielding those assumptions when they come across them in social settings, but there are many that don't feel comfortable, and it's immediately a put off on somebody, and it signals to them, whether consciously or subconsciously, that you may not be friendly to them or what they may have to say or may have to offer to the given social setting. So allyship can be small in that regard. It can also, on a personal social level, go as far to, I was at Pride Fest in New York this past weekend, and there was a very long line of straight allies offering free hugs to members of the LGBT community that may need them for whatever reason. I mean, that's obviously the other far end of the spectrum, but equally as needed, equally as important. And then in the workplace, as Judge Wiseman said, it's offering those safe, inclusive environments, making sure that employees or associates who may have in the LGBT community have a voice, have a seat at the table, have policies that protect them in the workplace, that make sure that they're not mistreated or treated unfairly. And then, you can go as far in allyship as supporting different political efforts or advocacy causes. HRC, each state has its own equality arm, Equality Florida, Equality Illinois, anything. And if you wanted to take it that far, but you don't have to. Allyship can appear in many different shapes and sizes, from the smallest conversation to the more larger efforts that we've talked about.
I love those answers. I really appreciate your thoughtful response, and I even jotted down a few takeaways that I think I'd like to share with our Empowerment and Opportunity Committee as even further steps that our firm can take. So I really appreciate the thoughtful responses. Do you have another question here from Ashley Watson, who's a partner in our Columbus office? Ashley asks, how do you think your personal experiences as an LGBTQ plus person have impacted the decisions you make now on the bench or in the boardroom, if at all?
I can start with that one, Judge, if that's okay. I would say it's given me a more compassionate and understanding lens through which to view different issues that may arise. I think most people have seen those memes or stories where you never know what someone's going through that you may encounter in everyday life. And I think that's very, very true. And I think, being able to, if an issue or a dispute arises or some sort of conflict is present, I think it helps me take a step back and realize there may be other issues at play that I might not be cognizant of or aware of, and to take, even if I don't have to learn those things or know those things, to take that into account when navigating a problem and working towards a solution. I'd say that more than anything else is I know what I went through. I know the internal struggles that I had that I never voiced to anybody, that impacted a lot of my decisions and feelings that nobody was ever aware of because I didn't want them to be at the time. And I know that impacted what I went through and how I navigated issues and problems. And I think it's having that understanding and that compassion that may be present in others and in any situational conflict that may be there, whether in the boardroom, in the courtroom, I think having that lens and that understanding, I think it arms me. I'll speak for myself. I think it arms me with different ways to approach problems and offer solutions, which I think is invaluable, especially in the legal profession or in a corporate setting.
Yeah. So nobody's going to believe this, but Tom and I actually did not confer for these questions, but yet it's like we're long lost siblings as we go through this because our thought process is so similar. So that's great. It's a great experience. So as a judge, this is my view: is the three most important qualities are to be humble, to be kind, and to listen with an open heart and an open mind. And I know growing up gay, that's what I wanted and that's what I needed. I didn't want people to prejudge me. I didn't want people to cut me off. I didn't want people to, provide a construct that was going to be limiting to me. And so I think that my devotion to those traits of being humble and being kind and listening, not just with brain, but also with heart, to try to understand people and meet people where they are. That's been shaped by my own personal experience. And I bring those, I really try to bring those qualities to bear in everything that I do, but particularly in this, in my official role. And, I'm just trying to treat everybody that comes in front of me with dignity and respect, and making sure that that is the expectation of everybody that works for this organization. That's the one deal breaker I have. Treat somebody badly, and we're going to have a really serious conversation about whether you're right for this role. Because how people interact with the justice system can have a tremendous impact on how they view government, how they view their rights, how they view their place in society. So we take that incredibly seriously. And I do think it helps. I've known the sting of being in a situation that I felt was unfair. I've known the sting of being in situations where I thought people weren't going to listen to what I had to say just because of who I was. And so I've really doubled down on that and very, very committed to that. And being humble to listen to people's stories. I love to learn about people, and you have to meet them where they are. And I think that's a really important aspect of dealing with a incredibly broad stakeholder group like a general division type court does.
Again, really great responses and very sincere. Appreciate you sharing those thoughts and responding to the question. I want to sort of go back to some of the questions that I thought of in preparation for our conversation, and particularly because I can see that we're joined today by a lot of young lawyers and even some of the law clerks in our firm, which I'm really glad to see that they value this opportunity to learn from people who have broken barriers in the legal profession. Can you tell us a little bit about your role models, who your role models are, or maybe were, or maybe, I know I haven't stopped gathering role models. So maybe you have some still in your current life, and how did they or do they encourage you to pursue your professional aspirations?
Tom, do you want to go first on this one?
Sure. I think from a role model perspective, and I'll speak to it as a young lawyer and as a current lawyer. My role models as a young lawyer and as a lawyer were those that utilize their skills and knowledge and passion and advocated for rights of marginalized communities. So, like, to give you some example, I have a friend who has a law firm out in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I actually went to high school with her. But she's been a big role model for me. She set up a practice, and her practice centers around advocating for LGBTQ rights. She recently, for Pride Month, did an event called Caravan of Hope, where she literally took an RV and went around to cities around the United States, offering pro bono legal services to those in different communities that may need it. Like, just amazing work out of her heart, out of something that she wants to do. And it's people like that that give me hope, and that I honestly serve as role models to me. Those in the ACLU, like Chase Strangio, who was part of the Title VII case before the Supreme Court recently, like those type of attorneys and advocates, and those that can render their skills for the betterment of others and the furtherance of society, I think are just tremendous individuals. So as a lawyer, it's those type of individuals in people. And I think, if I'm speaking as a non-lawyer, growing up, it was those that I looked up to and those that I aspired to be, even though at the time I didn't know how, were those that were out and vocal in a positive way, and just there to be, a beam of light to those of us that may not have known how to navigate who we were or who we are back then, and where to go from there. And those that, and I think those in the media, those in sports that have come out and taken the step and become their authentic selves to the public, I think is just so important. And to me, as a young person, were just tremendous role models, and not just those that came out, but those who are fierce allies. So, without being too cliched, your Lady Gagas, your Chers, your gay icons throughout the ages, just have tremendous value. Speaking for myself as a young person who didn't know how to navigate who he is. So.
Yeah. So, in the present day, one of my key role models, quite frankly, is my wife, who runs a very successful nonprofit here in the Dayton area, and has, devoted her life to, a mission to help the disadvantaged throughout our community, and however that disadvantage might be occurring. And our jobs are vastly different, right? So she's running this feel good, happy, let's help people nonprofit, and I'm a judge. And so one of the things that's helpful for me about that is I never want to go home and say, I had a bad day and I did something and it makes me feel uncomfortable. So, she is a great role model for me, and helps me keep on my path of, staying true to my own values. So there's that. And then throughout the practice of law, in part because of practicing in Little Rock, Arkansas for a while, and then in a smaller community of Dayton, there have been a dearth of openly LGBTQ lawyers where I have practiced. And so typically my mentors have been incredibly strong women in the law, and had a law partner who was a woman who acted as my champion for many years, and and did it in a way that it wasn't formal. She would just drop by my office at 10 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, we're going to go get coffee. And I'd be like, but I can't, I have this due and I have this meeting. And she'd be like, I will take care of it for you. We're going to go have coffee, whether you want to or not. We're going to go have coffee, and spend time with me to, talk with me about what I was experiencing, what I was working on, what my concerns were, offer advice and insight. So it's really been the more senior women that I've worked with that have been my mentors and my role models. And then just like Tom was saying, I think we get mentorship and role models for different things from different people. And I certainly, would see lawyers practice law, and I would say, I want to be like that. When I grow up, I want to be like that person. And certainly as a litigator going through courts across the United States, I would think to myself, if I ever become a judge, I'm hoping that I'm a lot like that person, right? I want to be like that. I want to handle that circumstance with that grace and poise that I just saw. And then also you'll have the counter to that of saying, oh my God, I hope if I'm a judge, if I do that, somebody just takes me out back and shoots me, because that was just an awful circumstance that I just observed. So I think we draw from different people what we need at the time. And ironically, Sandra Day O'Connor, first female justice of the United States Supreme Court, probably from a jurisprudential standpoint, we could not be further apart, but she was the first, and she acted with incredible dignity and incredible grace. And some of the things that she encountered, when you look back at it from a historical perspective, from today's lens, were just abhorrent. But she did it again with great grace, great strength, great aplomb. So, looking from her to RBG, for example, that plucky, talk about somebody that persevered in the face of adversity, knowing that you're going to be the dissenter, probably 80% of the time, and still sticking with it and doing so. And the great thing about that, I also role model off of RBG, was her great friendship with Judge Scalia. And I mention that because I view part of my role as reaching out and having dialogue and interacting with people that I know don't agree with me. Being able to be to have differences of opinion, but still be agreeable, still be collegial, still be collaborative. One of the things that we do have to work on, or we want to work on together. So for me, it's an amalgamation, I draw from different people for different things, depending on sort of what well I need to fill in myself, or what insight I'm trying to look for my own self and my own career at the time.
I would just add one thing that came to my mind as you were speaking. To me, an advice I would give for anybody looking for a mentor or role model is look for things that align with your values. People who are compassionate, humble, that value the things that you do. I mean, that's how I gravitated to the role models that I mentioned, and I think that's important for anyone. As Judge Wiseman said, you could see a judge that gave an awful decision that you would not want to imitate. So obviously that's not going to be your role model, but you'll see someone who did something amazing in a courtroom that you really want to emulate and work towards. And that's like, look for the values that align with your values. And that's, I think, the number one way to gravitate towards role models or mentors.
Let's stick with mentorship for a minute. And I'm just doing a time check. We have about 15 minutes left. I know we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. I'm also going to make a plug for the participants to ask questions if you have them. Again, I'm really pleased to see we have young lawyers, law clerks, and staff also on the call. So I'm really glad that folks are taking advantage of this opportunity. Don't let it slip by. So if you've got questions for Tom and Judge Wiseman, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. But let's stick with mentorship for a minute. How, you're both incredibly busy people with not much free time on your hands. How do you mentor young lawyers, or maybe non-lawyers, other, young people, or maybe not young people, folks who are looking for mentorship? And I'm really interested in your answers, and some, we hear oftentimes from young lawyers or people entering their professions that they're unsure about how to get a mentor. How do you become a mentee? And it's, I think those of us who have been around longer than some of these new lawyers, like to sort of share that it's not really about, it's about sort of connection. And Tom, as you said, finding someone whose beliefs and values and professional aspirations align with your own. But how do you navigate mentorship from the mentor perspective?
Tom, do you
I
want
Sure. I can start with that. So from a mentor perspective, I basically any young attorney or even paralegal or anybody that I work with that comes across my way, I view as a mentee. If I'm supervising them in any sort of capacity or offering advice, I view myself as a mentor, and then my mentee. So for me, it's very much a natural progression based on circumstance as to the mentor-mentee relationships. That's what I found when I was early in my legal career with attorneys that I worked under. I had a few main partners that I basically trained under and honed my skills as a lawyer, but not just skills, but also value, judgment, doing the right thing, those types of important things, professionalism, those types of attributes I learned through my mentor relationship. So that's what I like to pass on to my mentees. But it's not just skill training, which is an important part of it, but it's also, those other things that I mentioned is like bringing other things to any potential problem, to any potential issue that you may face, bringing that extra perspective, that understanding, that other angle, and helping them see there are different ways to look at any given problem, and there are different solutions that you can navigate through for any different issue or problem. And the one thing I always say with anybody who I may be fortunate enough to mentee, and I think this may have dovetailed to one of your other questions, but I'll say it now. The one piece of advice that I always tell people is to always identify any given problem with a proposed solution, whether it's right or wrong. Show that you're a problem solver, show that you're thinking about the problem in a way that is solution based. And I say that with an adage to what I just said, is that you can view any problem with multiple different solutions and multiple different angles. And I think the more you train on that and the more perspectives you bring to any situation or problem, I think the more tools you have at your disposal to navigate whatever issues may come your way.
Yeah, so Tom, that's a great insight into it. And for me, part of it, I view my role and responsibility as accessibility. And because I work in a role where I am extremely isolated from modern society. And so I have to understand I need to break down those barriers. And so, I do a lot through the Bar Association. I try to go to a lot of events where, quite frankly, I'm not surrounded by armed men, and I'm not 3 feet elevated, and I'm not wearing a black robe, because that's a real put off to authentic conversation. So, I have to make myself accessible first and foremost, and we try to have a sort of an open door policy here in the courthouse. But I also will sometimes just walk through the hallways so that people can grab me and start talking to me, so I can start building those relationships with individuals. But certainly for more structured, something that I really want to drive forward. One of the things that I will do is, again, I just think that inviting somebody out for a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and to get in a neutral location and just having an unstructured conversation and find out what's on people's minds, and what they might be struggling with, and what they would need potentially some insights from. And I always couch my advice up. This is always what I did as well. Never make a drastic change based on my advice only. Talk to multiple people and then synthesize the advice and instruction and suggestions that you get to find one that resonates with you and feels authentic to you, because what worked for me may not work for you. But I think it's great for the mentors to reach out to the potential mentees, to reach out to a summer associate, to reach out to a paralegal, to all of the staff members from top to bottom. How's your day going? Is anything going on that you want to talk about? Because I view myself as I'm one cog in a very complex machine. My role is no more significant or important than the people that form all of the other cogs, because if you miss one cog and the whole system's going to collapse. I can't do my work without my IT team. The IT team can't do their work without our janitorial staff. We're all part of one team, and having that, reaching out to people so everybody feels included, like there is an opportunity. And I think, and sometimes people will come to me with problems and concerns, and I can't always solve those, but I can for sure go back and say, here's what I did in response to that. Here's the steps, whether they're satisfactory or unsatisfactory, but at least I tried. So that people, in fact, feel heard, because I think that, in more hierarchical organizations, that sense of I can talk to people, but nothing ever actually changes. But to, say, okay, here's the amount of change that has happened, and here's why there might be some logistical or systemic barriers to further change at this time. So let's plan a long-term game plan for how to accomplish this, because as they sometimes say that you can't turn the Titanic on a dime, and complex organizations are often just have some systemic restraints to change, and you got to understand that and understand how to peel it off. But to try to again make people feel as though they are as valued as the people throughout the organization. So that's the approach that I take to mentoring. And again, I think it's just really important to just be authentic and honest with people, and guide them as best you can through whatever might be going on in their lives.
The most successful mentor-mentee relationships are symbiotic, going off what Judge Wiseman said, and not hierarchical. You learn as much from your mentee as a mentor may convey to the mentee. And I think that is very, very true. There isn't a power position at play in that relationship. There really shouldn't be. I think a mentee can offer their mentor just as much insight and perspective that may be different from what they're used to, as the mentor may be able to guide the mentee from a training perspective. So,
what a great point. I think mentors and mentees have different things to offer one another. So you're right, from a professional perspective, a mentor certainly has more experience, but you're right, the relationship is multifaceted and should be symbiotic. So I love that point. We do have a question from Haley Below, one of our law clerks in our Akron office. Kudos to you, Haley, for not being afraid to ask questions. Haley asks, do you have any suggestions for young LGBTQ plus lawyers going into an old boys club profession?
Well, I'm going to take that on. So the one thing that I've learned through life is that, the old boys club perception, or any of those exclusionary perceptions, those are, ignore them. That's how I got to where I am today, either because I was too young and inexperienced to recognize that there was supposed to be an exclusion, or now that I'm older where I don't care that there's an exclusion. I show up and I bring my best self, and people will either accept it or they won't. But my view is, you may not want me in the room, but I'm in the room. I'm going to bring tremendous value in the room. And either you're going to recognize and value that and proceed accordingly, or I will take my value someplace else where I am acknowledged and valued. So that concept, when people have a construct or a perception of exclusion or discrimination or bigotry, or however you want it to phrase that, that is a construct that constrains and restrains them. It is no longer a construct that constrains or restrains me. That's their problem. It's not my problem. I'm still showing up. I'm still swinging for the fences. I'm still going to bring my best self forward. And often by virtue of doing that, again, even in the old boys club perception, you're going to find that there are allies there. And that perception isn't necessarily going to stick. So I would say, to hell with it. I know it sounds like a cliche, but I mean that from the bottom of my heart. To hell with them. You go, you be you, you do you, you bring your best self there, you show your great work, you show your tremendous intellect, and let the chips fall where they may, because somebody's going to snap you up. If it's not in that grouping, somebody's going to love you. And you're going to find the best possible spot for you. But Tom, what do you think?
I honestly don't think I could have said that better. You do you, don't get small just because you perceive it's a certain type of environment. Continue to put your best foot forward, and be you, be the authentic you. And just as Judge Wiseman said, if you're not valued, somebody else will value you. But don't get small, don't change who you are, don't change what you have to bring to the table. Just keep putting your best foot forward.
I think it's also a great reminder for allies to exercise allyship and, to have our antenna up and recognize when someone who might not have the platform to advocate for themselves, but we can. That's our opportunity to really demonstrate our allyship. I'm so pleased that you both were able to join us today. I took notes. I learned a lot. I feel heartened by the things you shared with us. Your time is valuable, and we appreciate it. We've got 3 minutes. Anything either or both of you like to say in conclusion before we release you to the rest of your day?
Well, I would just say happy Pride Month. And Pride Month is a spectacular celebration across the country. To recognize the struggle of the LGBTQ plus community. Its accomplishments over time, as well as the challenges that it continues to face. So, if you have somebody who is LGBTQ plus in your life, go out and hug them today. Be one of those free hugs, because that's what keeps the world moving.
I would echo that and say, just keep valuing your authenticity, bringing your authentic self and what you have to bring to every table. Be prideful, especially in honor of Pride Month, and not just during Pride Month, but all year long. And that's where you'll find your power, your confidence, and your value. Your authentic self has value, a tremendous value, to any organization that you may find yourself in. And don't ever second guess that point. And the only other thing I'd say is thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for this bringing together this panel and this discussion. I think it's very important, and thank you very much.
Thank you all so very much.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone. And you can find the recording on the BMD website, and I believe Sarah will send it out to participants as well. Happy Pride Month. Have a great afternoon.